Just not ready. Do you think it really goes that far? That, ladies and gentlemen, is Edward Buck, greatest runner alive.
Hello there. Today I'm going to talk about what it's like to run cross country in the UK versus the US. So to get things started, a bit of background. So my name is Edward Buck and I'm a graduate student at USF and am a D1 runner in cross country and track and field. But before that, I studied in the UK. I studied my undergraduate degree in New York. I'm from the UK and I grew up doing UK cross country. So it's only just this past autumn or fall where I have done US cross country. And so I'll give a bit of a comparison on the two. A quick shout out to Keith and all those at the Lincolnshire Runner. I love the new t-shirt, the t-shirt that they have. It's a really nice t-shirt and it's a great place to buy running shoes. It's my favourite shop in the world. And yeah, I got my new Nike Invincibles from them. I'll be using these a lot. Great place to buy shoes and spikes. And so if you're looking for a pair of 15mm spikes, they'll always have some in. So if you need them for the UK cross country, they're a great place to go. So to kick things off, I'll start talking about UK cross country. So for UK cross country, generally the courses are very tough. There's always a lot of mud because most cross country is run through the winter months, which is usually the wettest months in the UK, so there's a lot of mud. And a lot of our parts, kind of natural parts, can be quite boggy. And it's not surprising to get mud in some races that can be almost up to your knees. So in terms of spikes for UK cross country, generally you don't want much of a spike. You generally just want a spike which you just put replaceable spike pins in. You want to be putting in 15s for most races because most races are going to be really muddy. And actually these are an old pair of spikes now, and one of the spike pins has been bent, and that's from like road crossings and races. Because when you have 15mm spikes in, there's going to be, if you don't land perfectly on your spikes, and if you have ever slight lateral movement, then the spike can bend. And actually, in one of my races, in my last season for UK cross country, it was in Bucks cross country. The spikes I used to wear, I think they were like a pair of Adidas Adizero, like the old track spike of that version. I used to wear that for cross country races. That's when I like really bent the spike, and it was actually like kind of going like sideways into the shoe. And yeah, it brings me on to that topic of how fast the races are. So that race at Bucks, I came 21st, and that's for the British University Champs. And that's a 10k race, and I ran, I think it was just under 35 minutes for that race. The winner ran just under 34 minutes. So, you know, for 10k race, that's not the fastest of 10k races in terms of university cross country level, especially when some guys in that field can run under 14 minutes for 5k and under 30 minutes for 10k quite easily. But yeah, it's just the conditions. It was very muddy that day. So yeah, in terms of like how hard UK cross country courses are, so after finishing my US cross country season, I came home to do the Liverpool Cross Challenge in the UK, which is one of the big UK races that determines the European team for the European cross country. I ended up wearing Dragonflies for that race as I bought them back home from the US especially. and I like the spike. And I would recommend to any of those people who run cross country in the UK, don't wear Dragonflies for cross country, because I do enjoy the Dragonflies, but they are not well suited for the mud. And in Liverpool, it was very muddy when I ran that day, and the amount of foam in the shoe doesn't really help you go through the mud too much. But yeah, and that was a tough race, and it's a big shock to my system because obviously coming from San Francisco, which has very little rain, very little mud. In California itself, most of my races have been in California, not having really any mud, to running through quite deep, thick mud in some places, it kind of knackered out my system a bit quicker than I'd have liked to. Without a shadow of a doubt, UK cross country courses are definitely harder. And the hardest of those courses, for me personally, it doesn't even come close, but the National Cross Country in Parliament Hill in London. So when I ran that race last year, this was my last race of the cross country season because I picked up an injury afterwards in my foot. That was a 7.6 mile race, and it was very, very muddy in a lot of parts. And it had almost 1,000 feet of elevation gain. So it was very, very tough. I found it very tough. And it's up some of the hills, I'm running 10-minute mile pace, and the people who lost their spikes literally were kind of almost like sliding back down the hill because they just couldn't get up it. It was like that slippy, that muddy. So now I'll talk about US cross country. US cross country, in a way, is completely different from most UK cross country courses. A lot of the courses are a lot faster. So the first race I did out in the US was a home meet. I ended up, I think I wore an old pair of Streak LTs. I think they're the LT4s, Nike Streak LT4s. I ended up running, 8K in like 25:01. So that was a slow race. It didn't go off too quick at the start. But compared to UK courses, 25 minutes for an 8K UK course would be winning like the national championships because the mud slows you down that much. But we run longer distances in the UK than in the US. Courses aren't always just pure grass, and there's not really much mud anyway. A lot of them can just be like cinder tracks, like gravel tracks, and like light dirt, basically light dirt road. So they're definitely a lot faster than the UK, especially in California. There's not much rainfall. There's not really any mud on any of the courses. So it's always going to be much faster than the UK, and quite a lot of the courses are quite flat. There are some which aren't as flat in the US, but again, they won't compare to the National Cross Country, which has almost 1,000 feet of elevation, and that's through mud. So I think that's like the hardest cross country race you could probably think of at Parliament Hill. But yeah, US cross country is much faster, and because US cross country is a lot faster, it's almost kind of like a different way of training for it. So kind of like you need a lot more speed for the US. So instead of strength, so UK you need a lot of strength to go through the mud. In the US, a lot more speed element involved because there's not much strength in there. There's not as much objects it's not the mud to slow you down. And in terms of shoes for the US cross country, so Dragonflies was what I've been wearing this season for when we had grass courses. And Dragonflies great for US cross country because there's not much mud. And the Germany course has been quite firm underfoot. In terms of other shoes to wear, so I mean, I've seen people wear like Alphaflys in the US for cross country, which would be completely unheard of in the UK. If you wear Alphaflys for UK cross country, you're giving yourself a massive disadvantage, and you'll probably ruin them so it's definitely not worth the money to do that. This season I was wearing for the courses which were like kind of like dirt tracks, not really suitable for spikes. I wore the Streak Flies or the Streak LTs. and yeah, so it's completely different to the UK in that regard. But with the US cross country being a lot faster, they can be, in a sense, more painful because it is a bit like training for like a 10k road race or an 8k road race. So it's kind of, you still need a lot of strength involved, like have a really high lactate threshold to be able to handle the paces. And I guess a huge big difference in the US versus UK is US courses, only US cross country in general, the start tends to be so much faster. As in, like, well, the NCAA, what was it, like a few years ago, went off first 800 in like 2 flat, which is, well, well under world record 10k pace on the track. And yeah, even in like some of the races that I've done, so like so I think I've done the fastest first mile for me was a 4:36 this season. So again, pretty quick. Which probably kind of affected me when I went to Liverpool, just for the UK, when I went back to the UK, thinking, yeah, I'll go off like I normally have been doing this cross country season, like out in the US, because everyone goes out really hard. And then suddenly I find myself at the front of the race. To conclude, UK courses are generally muddier, a lot harder in terms of like the strength involved, and they're generally slower. US courses are generally faster, well, by a lot faster, and there's much less mud involved. You don't have to have like the biggest set of spikes in, or spike length in. Now there was one cross country race this season, I will admit, which was our conference meet, the West Coast Conference in Oregon, where it was muddy, and it was well, a bit like a UK course. We were wearing white vests, and we did come up like, they ended up more brown at the end of it with all the mud than white. But again, the mud wasn't like that thick. It wasn't as thick as UK courses, and it was, you could still run pretty fast through the mud for the most part throughout that course. And it wasn't as hilly as other courses I ran in the UK. Actually, spent most courses I ran in the UK. But yeah, another thing with American courses is they also have cross-country courses. They have PBs. You can get PBs quite well. I mean, I got a PB in the 10k and the 8k this cross-country season. I wouldn't be doing that in a UK cross-country season. That's because the races are just very fast, and there's just that standard of running there. But yeah, I've really enjoyed both races. I both really enjoyed the UK and US cross country. Personally, for me, I do prefer US cross country over UK cross country. I just find it more fun, and it makes me feel good knowing that I can run like these fast times. I've also really enjoyed the team aspect on the team for the cross country in the US. Alright, I just want to say thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I'm hoping to do one with Wisdom Wednesdays every Wednesday for the foreseeable future. Try and vary things up a bit. So if there are any things you want me to talk about, any questions you have or you want me to answer, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. But yeah, stay tuned.
That's a good wisdom.